So I'm Joanna, and I think I'm gonna keep this fairly informal. I know we only have a few minutes, but I want to just start it off by telling you a little bit about my background and what I do and what I've done actually, for this presentation. So I'm also a counselor, and I've been working with clients with eating disorders, and I primarily use equine-assisted psychotherapy to work with clients with eating disorders. And I also teach full-time in the counseling department. So I've tried to bring some of this information to students by doing some of the demos, and the students were all excited. It was optional, but all of the students actually came and attended a few sessions out there at the Spirit Open Equestrian program. They really enjoyed it. And then a few students have actually asked me to teach a course over the summer, which was supposed to be an independent study course with one student, and it turned into a 5-student course. So it was a lot of fun. So we went out there at the barn about 3 different times, and we had various sessions, and I'm actually getting ready to propose a new course as an elective that will be taught next summer. I'm also I'll tell you a little bit about what I have in mind, and then I'd like to see if you guys had any questions and what particularly are you interested in learning about rather than me just giving you a bunch of information. I do have a bunch of pictures really rather than information. So
I know I had a friend who's practicing as a registered nurse right now at the University of Kentucky.
Okay.
And she participated in an equine study, and I think it was about management. She hasn't received the results back yet, but they interacted with the horses. She was telling me all the different steps, but I'm like, this sounds very, there could be some similar things to this.
Yeah.
I just wanted to see what exactly it was about, so that when she does tell me her results, I'll have a better idea.
Yeah.
But for my own personal
I
use.
did, actually, it just sounded like an interesting topic.
Well, I'm very happy you are here.
Also, now that I know how you applied it, like, why in particular this group did it help?
Okay, so that's a really, really good question. So I'm going to start by just telling you a little bit about horses and kind of how they're different from other animals used in therapy, particularly dogs. With horses, because they're prey animals and because of their high fight or flight type of response, like when there's a stimulus, their brain typically goes into flight. They're very much like deer, and they're herd animals, so they're very relational. They have various qualities that make them really, really sensitive to emotions and to somebody's energetic field and emotions, and they provide very clear feedback. Dogs will typically love humans, no matter what's happening. Horses have a tendency to be very, very honest in terms of the feedback that they provide because their survival depended on it. It still kind of depends on it. So they're very, very sensitive and will particularly respond to people's emotions. So if somebody goes in there with, high aggression, they will respond by fleeing. It's not safe. You may be a predator. I'm going to take off. If somebody also doesn't have a very clear sense of self, and particularly body self, which is often the case with clients with eating disorders, horses will pick up on that and will push them around. So it's a very interesting, very, very interesting interactions can occur. And also through these interactions, like for example, my goals in therapy are related to building that embodied sense of self. A lot of our clients disconnect from their bodies, are up in their heads, ruminating about, what they should eat and anxiety and whatever it's caught up in terms of mental health issues. And with horses and being around horses, they practice mindfulness. They get to be much more aware of their bodies and their boundaries in terms of their bodies. And they get to learn that very quickly because horses can step on you, can, drag you around. So they start to work on that physical sense of self. So rather than, okay, I need to be more assertive, it's more like, no, I'm being dragged around, therefore I have to be more assertive. So they develop kind of, instead of being top to bottom, cognition to body type of feedback through therapy, it's a body to cognition type of therapy. So it's a very somatic approach. Other things that I tend to work with in therapy are related to relationships. And again, a lot of the clients with eating disorders have experienced some dysfunctionality in relationships because they're, trying to please. They're very perfectionistic, trying to please. And some of them, a lot of them, a great percentage actually have had some form of trauma. So in that sense, horses start kind of teaching relationships in a different way. They're very non-judgmental, obviously. And they're also not going to respond the same way people do, in terms of, there's no lying, there's no dysfunctionality in terms of the relationship. It is pretty honest. And if you're also not... Well, they tend to be, if you're not present, if you're not here with me, and if you don't set boundaries, yes, I'm going to do whatever I do, so I think that they have a very honest way of, I appreciate them a whole lot. And I also have, and I've done therapy with clients with eating disorders for probably the past 6 or 7 years. And to be honest, with the horses, I get to, the work and the progress that I see with them within a few sessions, it's a lot greater than spending months sitting in an office and trying to get that information, because I get to observe them in relationships, and oftentimes the patterns that they have outside of the therapy session, they tend to replicate, with the horses and the relationships. And oftentimes those patterns are also what keeps them trapped and maintaining the eating disorder. So it's not just the eating disorder, but we work on the underlying issues like relational issues, trauma issues, trust, management of anxiety, management of, fluctuating emotions, depression. So we work on all of the underlying issues with the horses. And it's very... it's not manualized type of treatment, so that makes it a little bit harder. It's based on a lot of different experiments and kind of an intuitive sense in terms of, okay, what's happening right now with this client and with this horse? Where are they disconnecting? Where are they connecting? And where do we go from here? And so that's kind of some of the challenges in terms of producing evidence-based research. Those are some of the challenges. But a lot of the places, there's a lot of eating disorder treatment centers throughout the nation that are actually using equine-assisted psychotherapy and have been using it for years. And it's a pretty expensive program to have if it doesn't produce results. But I typically, at the clinic where I'm at, they tend to give me the clients that they don't really know what to do, what else to do with. So we get to, they're not talking a whole lot, they're not making a lot of progress. So working with the horses also gives me a very concrete way of, rather than asking you, so how do you feel about this? And what happens when you go out there and interact with this person? It's kind of like, no, let's go and walk the horse. And while, the adolescent may be walking the horse and they think, oh, I'm just walking the horse, I notice, how do they hold the rope? How close are they to the horse? Do they have a good sense of self, in terms of boundaries? Do they tend to just get pushed around by the horse? And if I pick the horse that is typically very, very good with clients and still gets pushed around by that horse, that's a sense for me that that client has no boundaries and will be pushed around by anybody. And as they negotiate these boundaries and these relationships, they tend to kind of grow towards a healthier self. So that's kind of about the work with the clients. I don't know if you have, there's different definitions to equine-assisted psychotherapy. Some approaches use an equine specialist, others don't. I don't use an equine specialist. I did a training that expects me to be a competent horse person too. And they, so we work with them in therapy, but I don't use them as tools. So I always have that respect an ethical obligation towards the horse too, in terms of noticing their well-being and realizing that they're a sentient being that is reacting in that relationship and responding. So some of the training requirements vary from a couple of trainings to the program where I'm in, which is a 2-year postgraduate program that has like 8 4-day intensives and exams and things like that. Clinical applications, like I mentioned before, with anxiety, depression, trauma, they've done more and more studies with also veterans. And there's a great deal of work with children with autism. I don't know if you've ever heard of the book and the movie Horse Boy. They're based out of Austin, and they've done a lot of work actually with a little boy with autism and kind of how that helps him reconnect and pay attention to social cues that typically otherwise don't happen. And there's actually, because you are in nursing, there's actually a lot of studies that are done in terms of the, not physical therapy, but kind of the connection that occurs with the horse that helps people who have also had traumatic brain injuries or certain neurological issues from birth or acquired, to just kind of heal through that process, the movement. Mostly the work that I do is on the ground, but there's other approaches that use riding as a component too. Just so I don't completely run out of time, I'll show you a couple of pictures. So these are some of the pictures from the equine assisted sessions that we did while I was teaching my eating disorders class. And so the students were out there and had to interact with the horses in terms of grooming them and establishing a connection, a relationship, and seeing what was coming up for them. So while it seems so like, why, what can happen from that? Oftentimes, actually one of the students had really strong reactions. It really reminded him of something from childhood and brought up kind of a sense of loss, but also reconnection. Other students, just realize how in a group they tend to also defer leadership to others. So there's a lot of really different social interaction patterns that we don't notice or we don't reflect upon just in other settings. And this particular horse is a Norwegian fjord Solveig. Very, very sweet. And this is Samson. He's actually a Belgian, and he's a huge guy, very, very gentle, who has a very, very keen ability to spot clients with trauma, whether or not I know it. Whether I know it or not, he tends to find them. We have 12 horses. I walk out in the field with the client, and he'll just show up. He knows when they're coming. So, and he really formed a really wonderful relationship with an 11-year-old little girl who has had actual sexual trauma, and he just loves on her. He's just her rock. And just recently, we've done actually some more body work also, and aside from psychotherapy, and she actually sits on him and rides him, and it's just very, very interesting. The two of them together are really, really funny. Yeah. She comes up to about here, and yeah. So these are the students. I can't take picture of my clients, but that's why I'm sharing pictures of my students from the sessions. This is Spirit, one of the horses that I basically could trust a 3-year-old with. But I also know when she pushes people around, they have no sense of self, like physical self. There's no, when she drags them around, we have to start from scratch. This is Solveig again. This is Samson again. And it was very interesting to see also how some were focused on appearance, some were focused on, you can tell the people who have like a tendency, like they're so focused on the task that they start grooming and forget about relationships, forget that my instructions were keep connected as a group and work with the horse as a group. And you see the ones that just focus on the task and lose, track of the relationship. And that's a very interesting discussion to have, right? Because you have group work, they will work as counselors in multidisciplinary teams. It's like, well, you'll be so focused on your task that you're not going to care who else is working with you. So it brought up some interesting discussions. And yeah, as you can see, Samson is not haltered, is not, he's not kept captive in there. So basically, as a result of some of this work, I mean, as a result, it kind of happened at the same time. We also put out there a publication that is starting to look from a theoretical perspective and a case study perspective and how we treat clients with eating disorders with the help of horses. And then the other piece, and I've actually worked, these are 2 doctoral students that were interested in this work too. And at the end of November, I will be presenting with the doctoral students who were in my independent study class in Williamsburg in terms of their findings, because they each did the classes, but also did a literature review on their population of choice. So if one of them is doing her dissertation on military and trauma, so she said, I'm going to look for information on how this is applied with trauma. Somebody else is working on, is very interested in working with clients with eating disorders. So you're welcome to come in. You're welcome to come in, join us.
So we have a class here, and there's no one ever here at this time.
Yeah, come on in. It's fine. If you don't mind listening into the presentation on horses and psychotherapy.
I was hoping to read, but
yeah.
My class starts. So thank
No,
you.
that's fine. So they each did their literature searches. That's how I was able to know that they found a lot of information. Really, not a whole lot. Wish there was more. So we'll be presenting that to other counselors in terms of various applications. And what was really neat is that the students are really willing to share their own experiences throughout the class, because we had very experiential type of sessions. And if you allow me 2 more minutes, I will actually put up on the screen some of their statements as, from their reflections to read. I was going to read them. I can actually, so these are my students' reflections. Let me see if I can read out 1 or 2. Like this was one of the touching ones. Hearing the facilitator, which was me, tell her, another student, that it's okay to want to connect and disconnect, and that it was normal, made me realize that the way I connect is normal for me. It does not mean that there is something wrong with me. So it's that non-judgmental. The horses walked in and walked out of the circle with the students and work with them depending on their on what was going on. As I'm writing with these words, tears are streaming down my face. I have believed for so long that I have to be a certain way, or it meant that there was something wrong with me. It is okay that I need to touch in order to feel connected. It is just what makes me, and I'm sorry that left the student's name in there. I tried to take the names out. Samson came into the group, and let me see, I'm missing. Being with Samson this time also helped me understand my husband better. I saw Samson come into the group and connect with us, and then he would move away. It was not that he did not care about us. It was just what he needed to do to replenish himself. So when my husband has times when he's emotionally drained, he needs to take some time to be alone to replenish. And it's not about that there is something wrong with me. I have been forever changed from interacting with Samson. I will never look at horses in the same way. I think that every counselor should experience equine therapy because of the affect, the effect that it can have on the counselor personally. I still conceptualize my experience using the HEAL model, which is one of the books that I've used as outlined in our textbook. I believe that the third key, mending the divided self, is what I experienced during this session. Most of my adult life, I have had to wear many faces and often did not feel safe to express my emotions. I believe that stuffing my feelings was easier for me. Working with Samson allowed me to feel safe and allowed me the opportunity to feel my emotions without feeling judged. I also saw that expressing my emotions was soothing to my soul and it did not scare Samson or the others in the group. So this is just, there are few accounts of the students and reflection to their interactions, because we did kind of a guided activity and they had an opportunity to reflect what came up for them. So rather than me say, this is how you should feel or this is the goal, it's just, you know, simply through trying to connect, and the horses connect and disconnect and move in and out of the relationships and do, you know, they have that sense of honesty, you know, in terms of responding authentically. So that's kind of the briefest version of this. So any questions? Any?
You sat through a presentation on therapy with police who were involved in shooting something. Maybe this would work with them.
Yeah, we're not kidding.
With, yeah.
Trauma of the police officer's life, and if they're involved in any kind of a shooting event, the fact that the departments mostly aren't doing anything for them, and how to help them heal from that. But yeah, looking at these things, oh, there's therapy, that might work.
Yeah.
Especially since they felt like they go to the psychologist all the time, and they say, so how are you feeling? Oh, fine.
Yeah.
Mhm.
They don't talk.
They don't want to talk, it's not macho.
And there's nothing to work with. If and they actually do this work sometimes with, I think there's a place that does that with veterans and of course, you know, with PTSD, but I think that they've done some work actually with prisoners, because again, there's not a lot of willingness to, oh, here's how I feel about this, but it's rather through building a different type of relationship and working differently. And to be honest, in terms of trauma, the horse's brain work very similarly to somebody with trauma's brain, because they have that intense, you know, there's a branch that breaks, they're in full flight mode, they're gone, they think afterwards. So having, you know, interacting with a horse, I think normalizes that process and also helps them, you know, how do I retrain that response? How do I not go into full-blown trigger and, you know, flashbacks and overreacting, you know, with rage or whatever else is going on. So, yeah. So that's probably a pretty good line of work. I've never had anybody mention that, but that's probably a really, it makes sense.
Do you want me to go ahead and order that DVD for Spoy? I didn't see it, but I don't think I ordered it.
Yeah, I think, well, there's a couple of other ones, but that one is good too. Okay. But I think that one is kind of in between therapeutic writing for children with disabilities and our field. So it's not required reading, but it's probably a recommended, so that they actually did go and do some observations with different populations and different approaches just to have a perspective on how this is different. So, yeah. Well, but even with the horse whisperer, it's just kind of that, just what happens to the person too, and kind of mending and healing as a result of the interactions. And yeah. Any other questions? Thank you so much. Thank you for taking the time.